Propertyology regards right now as a very exciting time for investing in Australian real estate. There are some fantastic opportunities that Propertyology can help you take advantage of before buyers re-emerge from their coronavirus cocoons. Propertyology has a national focus. Now more than ever, experience and knowledge are the most valuable currency. Propertyology has that in spades. To find out how Propertyology's multi-award-winning buyers agents can help you prosper, contact them now at propertyology.com.au.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show with your host, Phil Tarrant.
Good everyone, how are you going? Welcome to the podcast. We're all self-distancing, isolating right now as we navigate through COVID-19 and it's every second, every minute, every hour, there's a new update which is really helping us put our path through what is a significant crisis for a lot of people. I'm pretty active. I'm chatting with a lot of people right now, right across the property market sector, just getting their insights into how they're approaching COVID-19, what the steps they're taking now, immediate steps to look at how you can just navigate this first component of it over the next couple of weeks or the next month, and then what 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, even 2 years looks like down the path. We're going to keep covering this off. If you feel as though it's a fire hose of information right now around COVID-19, it is the most topical and most relevant thing that's probably happened in all of our lifetimes. So we'll keep discussing it and analysing it and determining how we can approach this moving forward and give you, our listeners, the best information possible so you can set your path through COVID-19. I'm just a journalist. That's what I do. My skill set is really finding quality people to have a chat with, aggregating, curating that information, making sure that I can share all those different views and opinions with you. In the studio with me today, recording over the internet through our virtual capabilities, Simon Pressley, Propertyology Head of Research, also REIA Hall of Famer. Now, the new thing, Simon, since we last spoke, this Hall of Fame thing.
No, it's not new. I was inducted back in 2014.
I saw some on the interweb, on the social media, some pictures of you guys picking up an award at some point, probably only about 3 weeks ago.
So that would have been the REIQ. So there's an REI in every state and territory. And Propertyology's office is obviously in Brisbane, although we buy nationally. But we picked up the gong for Queensland's Buyers Agent of the Year again, which is a great honour for the team.
Oh, great work, mate. I'm very happy for you and well-deserved accolade. The good thing about, for property investors at least, is that there is a real emergence of property buyers and property strategists coming into the marketplace. So it is a surging sector. There's a lot happening. You've been in the market for a considerable period of time, and to pick up that gong year on year, you must be doing something right, mate.
I hope so. I mean, I think now more than ever, Phil, changing world, changing markets, changing economies, experience counts now more than ever.
Absolutely. And just to our listeners, so as we navigate COVID-19, I urge you all to lean on those people who can help you set your strategy and undertake those tactics you need to be most effective in this environment. Choose your partners, and there's plenty of information on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au where we talk about choosing your partners in property investing. So Simon, surviving and thriving COVID-19. Right now, we're battling a health crisis. There's a pandemic virus. Everyone's tipped upside down. It is a crisis. We've had many crises before, but no two crises are exactly the same. So I thought today we could have a chat about this. Just put some perspective into where we are as a nation and where we are as a global community right now, what it's going to mean for property investment moving forward, what are those lessons from the past that we can draw on, and what makes this particular crisis unique. Our lifetime, the one crisis I can draw to in my professional life would have been the global financial crisis, which was a very different, the origin of that crisis was very different to this particular crisis, but there's going to be some similarities for how, as property investors, we navigate through this. So I thought we could just have a good chat today, Matt. I can pick your brain about how you see the world, and you're normally the voice of reason and sensibility, so I'm sure we'll get some good stuff out of you. I've just been thinking over the last couple of days as we enter this property investment podcast, the sort of stuff we want to talk about, and I want to cover off sort of what similarities this crisis has to past crises. Is there another side to this, and what does it look like? Also want to have a chat with you about, some property investors might be doing it pretty tough right now, so how they can get to the other side. And if you can afford to invest right now, should they be investing? And I want some good tangible stuff from you, not some, some broad stroke things. I want some suburbs. And to wrap things up right now, we'll just cover those things off, what property investors should really be focusing on. So for this immediate period for the next couple of weeks, then the next couple of months, and then moving forward. So, I drew a parallel of my experience of professionally of navigating the global financial crisis. I was a lot younger then, and I'd like to think I'm a lot more experienced now, but that's my benchmark for navigating crises. I imagine you were in the game then. You were working as a buyer's agent at that point in time, or what were you doing back at the GFC time?
Yeah, I just turned 50, Phil, so been around the block and got a bit of scar tissue. But this is a crisis. No two crises are the same, but there's always things that we can learn from history. So what Propertyology has done has looked at the various crises going back, say, over the last 100 years, and specifically to Australia, we've had a recession about 30 years ago. There's been a couple of major stock market crashes over the last, say, 30 years. There's been SARS and swine flu that are virus related. There's been the GFC, as you said. There's been credit crunches. So this coronavirus, I guess, it's probably a combination of SARS, swine flu, and a GFC. And it's important that we put all this in perspective. So it is a virus. It's important that people understand that the cause of the crisis is not an economic fracture. The global financial crisis was an economic fracture caused by the US. This is a crisis not caused by economic conditions, caused by a virus, which will have economic impacts, because the way to deal with the virus is to effectively close the globe down and squash the germ. So whilst we're all going through an enormous amount of disruption and inconvenience, some comfort that everybody should take out of this is, unlike, say, the GFC, this is a defined cause with a defined solution and a relatively defined time frame. We've dealt with viruses before, and the scientists of the world are dealing with the cure to that, and we're going through the temporary disruption so that people don't get infected until then. But we do know that there is the light at the end of the tunnel. We can't set our calendar by it. I guess the best guess, if you try to read the messages of the politicians who have the best information at the moment, is it might be somewhere sort of 4 or 5 months maybe of this significant disruption, and then progressively start to open the world back up again. So the most important thing is that right here, right now, all this discomfort that everybody is experiencing, if we want that to go away, liken it to Australia as 25 million students in a classroom who know nothing, and there is one teacher. We need to circle the wagons and get behind that teacher. Get one chief, no Indians. If we all do what that chief says, because they have the best information, it's going to cause some discomfort, but we will shorten the time frame of this inconvenience. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, that's right. And it is a health crisis. So what needs to be tackled first is minimising that impact. And everyone's talking about flattening the curve. It's the term for the new decade. I've never heard of it before, really, but I think every single person on the earth now is now talking about flattening the curve. And, I've mentioned before doing some other Smart Property Investment Show podcasts, our hats go out to the health workers who are out there on the front line dealing with this. And a lot of them are property investors as well. So I imagine you've got some of those people in your client base who are probably out there doing the big days, ensuring that they're getting this nation back on track as quickly as possible. But talk about this being temporary, Simon. And I think that's a really good point. How long it's temporary for is the challenge. And I tend to agree with you in terms of your sentiments around 5 to 6 months of disruption as we see it right now, and that may increase a little bit. We've had a lot of commentary coming out of the different states about whether or not act independently from the federal. So watch that space. But it is a temporary thing, Simon. But, how do you see it, this crisis in particular, when we base it against the global financial crisis? So we're talking about the health crisis. If we park that for a moment and then start talking about the ramifications of that health crisis being a financial crisis or a disruption to business, what can we learn from the GFC that we might be able to embody and embrace right now? And I think one of those things might be the fact that you've got the government moving really quickly to put a lot of stimulus into the economy and look at ways in which to keep Australians in jobs.
Yeah. So how this will affect property markets will be determined by how the virus affects Australia's economy. Everything in property, the economic conditions always has the biggest influence. So again, something else that Australians can take comfort from as we entered this coronavirus with probably the best economic conditions that we've had since before the GFC. Australia is one of the very few countries in the world that has a balanced budget. Now, we've heard several years of politicians talking about we want to get the budget balanced. The fact that we've got it there, and the fact that government debt is also among one of the lowest in the country, means that Australia is very, very well placed to provide the stimulus required to cushion our economy through this. And then indeed, the Prime Minister talks a lot about a strong and rapid bounce back with our economy. That will come, but we first now need to rally together. And I had that same confidence that we do have the arsenal. And one thing we can take out of this crisis, I would argue, Phil, that there has never been an event in the history of mankind, not just our lifetime and not just Australians, in the history of mankind, where we've got a crisis that affects 7.8 billion people on the planet equally. We know what it is. We know what we need to do to fix it. So therefore, for probably the first time in mankind, we've got the whole globe united doing the same thing. In Australia, it's the first time in my 50 years on this planet that I can recall that we've got the federal government, every state government, ASIC, the Reserve Bank, APRA, all on the same page. I can't ever recall that ever happening before. So we will get through this, and it will be a rapid bounce back, I think, out the other side of this, because the economic conditions that we had, yes, over the last 12 months, there'd been some negative trends with our economy, but let's not forget that was all related to APRA closing down credit for 18 months to 2 years. And just before the coronavirus started, APRA had released that. So Australia was already commencing a trajectory for its economy to really start supercharging. We were ramping up infrastructure projects, we'd slashed interest rates. So it's important we don't forget that. The trajectory that we're about to start, that's been put on pause. Again, I think a good term that our Prime Minister has been used. He's pretty much said Australia's economy has been put on pause. We all go into lockdown. We do what we do. The better we do it with our social distancing and hygiene, the quicker we can take the finger off the pause button, and there will be some really good opportunities on the other side of this.
It's absolute madness. And sometimes I sit here and just go, like, who would have thought even a month ago that we'd be having these conversations we're having right now? So the last time we got together, where we are right now, it is absolute madness.
And it's happened really, really quickly, hasn't it? Yeah. I know I feel completely different today to yesterday and the week before that. 2 weeks before that, I think I was just as guilty as most people in Australia going, oh, yeah, I've heard of that coronavirus thing. We might have a couple of weeks where things look a little bit differently, but, that's pretty much it. And it's just bang, it's hit us. Yeah,
I was in Singapore in early February of this year, and I got a good taste for it up there. That was heightened when I was up there. It was before it got a lot worse than what it does, but they'd already taken a lot of the steps that we're seeing now, walking in and out of hotels, getting temperatures checked. I'd be going to meetings and they'd be taking my temperatures and documenting it on a sheet. So, just mapping and monitoring how people may be moving around and how it might spread. So I got a little taste for it back. Okay, there's something coming here and it's going to happen pretty rapidly. But one of the things that I've found chatting with people like yourself and other people within the property investment space, it's around how you choose to approach this particular crisis and rationalising what it means. Now, a lot of people are under the pump right now, and many people are doing it harder than others. If there's been a wholesale loss of jobs for many, many people, and I think in particular around the hospitality sector, airline sector, and that is a big, big hit, right? Like that's absolutely game-changing for a lot of people, and it's got tough for them to push through. But for other people who have a little bit more stability in their roles, it's just really programming your brain so you best attitude towards it. How approaching it personally? Are you sort of, pardon using this analogy, this full half empty glass? Are you typically a pretty positive guy? You just taking a positive attitude towards it all?
Yes, I am, but I don't think there's many people at all that it doesn't affect in an adverse way. There's not too many people who, if you work in the health sector or if you work for Coles or Woolworths, you're probably busier than what you've ever been. I think your teachers will be safe, but that's it. Everyone else is adversely affected. So what social distancing does is it really shrinks the amount of goods and services that we can consume. So the things that every Australian normally goes about their life doing, a big chunk of that, in some cases we can't do any of it, or in other cases we can do very, very little of it. So this thing has got enormous tentacles that, there's very few people immune to it, including the real estate sector. Real estate is still open, but we've already seen people can't go to a traditional auction on the weekend. They can't have an open home with, 30, 50 groups going through the house. That doesn't mean people aren't transacting in property. One of the good things that's coming out of the coronavirus is it's forcing everyone to be lateral thinkers and to be more resourceful. From a buying property point of view, Propertyology has been doing this for 12 years. We very rarely buy properties at auctions or, we don't go to the traditional open homes. we use technology. You've got to when you're a business like ours that buys all around the country. I mean, we bought in, I think it's 16 different Australian cities over 5 states. So you can't do that without being a lateral thinker and resourceful. And now all other real estate professionals are going to have to, discover those things themselves. But the other thing is, Phil, is what is property? What are we investing in? It's an essential commodity called shelter. Now, to you and I, it's the vehicle, I suppose, to longer term financial independence. But where that term safe as houses comes from is from past crisis, from 100 years of crisis, from 200 years of crisis. People taking money out of stock exchanges or people taking money out of commercial property and putting into residential property. Because even during a crisis, we still need to go home and live somewhere. It's not like we all just line up in tents. We're still living in a house or an apartment, and that's essentially what we have invested in. Now, before we started this coronavirus, Australia was in a situation that Propertyology described as the best conditions for Australian real estate in more than a decade. And one of the reasons we said that is because the volume of properties in this country to house our 25 million people, there's a shortfall. We've had 2 years where building approval volumes have been much lower than what they need to be. Large parts of Australia have had really low vacancy rates. So the supply side of shelter hasn't changed with or without the coronavirus. We still need that shelter. And if anything, the coronavirus is going to slow the supply side of things down even further. When we get out of our cocoons in a few months' time, there will be an enormous release of pent-up demand. All the things we haven't been able to do, as soon as we are told we can do it, I don't know about you, mate, but I'm going to be, really cashing in and doing that stuff. So that will stimulate the economies really, really quickly. And then we're going to have the stimulus packages thrown on that. We got credit supply that's, the gates have been opened again. We've got all-time record low interest rates. We've got yields of circa 5%. That's when people are going to make some really, really good coin.
Yeah, and look, we will come out of this and we'll chat about that in a moment. There was a good reason why they called was it the Roaring Twenties? The reason why is because they come off the back of the First World War, which then moved into the Spanish flu and big hit on the globe. And then everyone came out of the 20s and just got right stuck into it. And I reckon it was a pretty good time. So maybe we'll have our 20s as well, right? But anyway, Simon, we're talking about the similarities between this crisis and a past crisis. And I want to get into that a little bit more. But before we do, we'll just go to a quick break. Back in a moment.
The Trident Formula, created by Sam Gordon at Australian Property Scout, is the strategic way to build a profitable property portfolio. If you're looking to perfect your strategy, go to www.australianpropertyscout.com.au to book a call with Sam himself.
Welcome back, everyone. Phil Tarrant here, host of the Smart Property Investment Show with Propertyology, Head of Research, Simon Pressley. Simon, we spoke about these similarities with the GFC, which is the crisis that most people will be familiar with and have probably lived through. Specifically, property during the GFC versus property during this particular crisis, two very different beasts, right?
Very different beasts, and it's important that we talk about those who are really doing it tough right now, and that will be millions of people, if not now, within the coming couple of weeks. We've just been talking and happy to talk further about there are opportunities, and those who can afford to invest now should still do so. But before we talk about that, there are some people who in the last week have lost jobs, nothing to do with their abilities or their performance. They've lost jobs. And this is where this crisis is very different to the GFC. Because we are all being forced into a cocoon, some people cannot work, or others who can physically work, the demand for their goods and services has shrunk because of this social distancing policy. So I think it's important we have a bit of a chat for those people doing it tough. There's some great policies and support packages that have been released probably a couple of weeks ago that we might have all heard but not really paid much attention to at the time, Phil. And now it's important that people are aware of those. So for example, if you've lost a job and you're an existing investor, worst comes to worst when you have to go on the dole. Some people have never had to do that in their life. The dole has been doubled. Now still will be a lot less. That income will be a lot less than what you're earning. But you can do a lot more with that extra money than if it was the regular dole. You have the ability now to contact your bank and to suspend your loan payments for up to 6 months. Now, if we think of the average household, for whatever we earn, A third goes in taxes, a third goes to our financial commitments, and a third is living expenses. The great thing about this freezing our mortgage payment is 1/3 of our expenses, we can now, pick up the phone or jump on the internet to our bank and say, I want to press that button. Please put my mortgage on hold for 6 months. That will take enormous pressure off households whose incomes are being challenged at the moment. The other wonderful thing is access to superannuation. There's a policy out there that if you can tick the, 2 or 3 simple boxes, an individual can access $10,000 of their superannuation money between now and 30 June, and an additional $10,000 between 1 July and into September. So that one individual effectively can get access to $20,000 of their superannuation money for 6 months. That's a lot of money when we're talking about putting groceries on the table for people whose income is under threat. So these are some really important things that I hope that everyone who's feeling some strain at the moment with their income, you take advantage of these things. They are great policies, and it's also why property markets will hold up well, because we are forced into our cocoons, but these policies means that people aren't forced into wholesale sales of assets. Assets will largely just go into a holding pattern for a period of time. Those who need to focus on income security should do that. Those who are comfortable with income security, here's the opportunity for you to transact in property where there's some great fundamentals, but very few people competing with you. So I reach out to those people who are doing it tough, and I want them to know that you are not alone, that there are millions of people in that same situation. Mental health is really important. If you're not affected, greatly by this financially, there's probably 10 people you know who are. Don't be silent. Check in and ask them how they're going, see what you can do to help them. We should all, while we're in our cocoon, take the opportunity to go for a walk. We can still practice social distancing, but get outside. Focus on a purpose. If you're really feeling down in the dumps, which a lot of people will be, find a purpose. Paint a room, dig a garden, design a jigsaw puzzle. Simple things, but gives you something positive to focus on and you can see yourself achieving. If you're not in that darker place and you're capable of looking at investing, review your household budget. Remind yourself, why do I invest? What's the purpose behind why I invest? That's right. It's because one day I don't want to be on that age pension. I can't do much on that sort of money. So review your investment strategy. And if you're able to, get your finances in order. Banks are still very much open. They are an essential service. There's teams of people in at banks with more capacity to process loan applications. Get your finances pre-approved. Work on a budget. I'm saying to all my clients, work on a maximum purchase budget of $450,000 and a gross rental yield of 5%. At a time when the typical mortgage or our investment expenses is 3%. Try to get that finance in place so that you can pounce in property markets as soon as your finances allow you to do that, whether that's today or whether that's in the coming months.
There's some really wise counsel there, Simon, and I might even get you to pen it through. Now that you're going to be homebound, you've probably got a bit more time over the weekend. But
you reckon? I've actually got less. I'm working longer hours.
It's funny, isn't it? But there's some really good counsel there, and if you can put something together on that, I'm sure the smart property investment community would really appreciate it. But a couple of things I would pick up that you said, and it's something that highly effective people that I know do, is that in times of uncertainty, when you don't know what's going on and there's a whole bunch of things you can't control, just getting some wins underway. And the wins can be as small as tidying up your lounge room or tidying up your cupboard. And then incrementally, these little wins are just endorphin hits that will really just naturally reset how you're thinking at any given time. To your points around looking after some personal administration that you might not have been looking after for the last year or so, budgets, getting your finance in order, reviewing your mortgages, reviewing your household spending, going through your credit card statements, looking about where you can cut back stuff. All these little things are great little wins that you can get underway. And not only is it going to help you embark down a better position financially, but personally and emotionally and mentally, it's going to help you out as well. So they're really, really good tips.
It's a cleansing opportunity.
It is a cleansing opportunity, and I organically do that. And always have done anyway. If an issue ever pops up, what I do is just I tackle it, just move through it, maneuver, push, and as you get one win turns into 5 wins, turns into 10 wins, and then you're winning, right?
Yeah.
and it just frames your perspective a little bit more. So we spoke about what property investors can do if they're doing it tough, and I think that's really good. We'll summarise all that also on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. We've been covering it quite a lot, and how they can get to the other side. Now, Simon, what does the other side look like once we are through this, and we're talking this immediate period, which might be 5-6 months of disruption and social distancing, and this whole concept of flattening the curve and how we can all contribute to that. But then there's got to be step-by-step incremental change as the economy re-kicks into gear and people move into hiring rather than firing or retrenching. What do you see the other side's going to look like, specifically around the property markets?
Yeah, great. It's a great point, because it's so easy for people with this, not just daily change, but hourly change. It's so easy to forget what the other side looks like. And if we don't do that, life will become very depressing very, very quickly. So the other side largely looks like how Australia was positioned before this started. And that, to answer that question or to picture that, listeners need to remember, middle of last year, we had the election. Negative gearing was safe. Capital gains tax was safe. Credit was, getting back to normal. 3 interest rate cuts. We had another one, since then. I think we've now had 4 or 5 interest rate cuts in 9 months or something. Lost count. We ended 2019 and started 2020 with enormously strong auction clearance rates. We put a report out. It was about January, February, where we did a helicopter view of all of Australia's property markets, capital cities and regional Australia. And large parts of Australia was running at double-digit price growth, right? So they are the fundamentals. When people hear that word, they are the fundamentals, because credit is cheap, credit is available, housing supply is tight, building approvals are low. On top of that, when we come out the other side, those conditions will still be there. On top of that, $105 billion stimulus. We had about $50 billion to cope with the GFC. We're doubling that, and I fully expect that in the coming months, the federal government will add more to that. So there's going to be a lot of stimulus. The free trade agreements that Australia has signed with countries all around Australia that businesses were only just starting to take advantage of, they'll pick that back up. The millions of jobs that will be lost in Australia over these last couple of years, businesses will quickly reopen. Pubs won't be closed forever. Airlines won't be closed forever. So whilst we're going to hear, and rightly so, a lot about unemployment rates going through the roof, Australia will go into a recession. But that word should not surprise people, should not concern people. Of course, we're going to have 2 consecutive quarters where economy doesn't expand. We know why that is, because we've been told to go in our cocoon. But that won't last forever. So when you hear the recession word, la, 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 block it out. When you hear the rising unemployment rate, there are going to be people who will be part of that statistic, right? Understand what the cause is, understand we know the defined time frame, and we know the solution to this. Like, the virus will go away. It won't last years, it'll last months. And we've got the arsenal to deal with it really, really well. There'll be city deals that'll, big billion-dollar projects, millions of dollars of projects between federal government, state governments, local city councils that will create an enormous amount of jobs. Well, we should be getting back to focusing on where in Australia has the best property market fundamentals. And those locations are the same locations that we should have been looking at in January and February before Corona started.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And just to give some sense to our listeners, Simon, I'm really dialed in the industries right across the nation, purely because of what we do at Momentum Media, 20 plus different sectors. Just heard today that, to give you some sense of how the government's going to be acting and operating, they're bringing forward infrastructure projects to ensure that they keep Australians in jobs. And I think that's a really good initiative. And, I'm very neutral in my political sort of positioning on this podcast, and anything that I do is irrelevant. But my view of what and how the government is acting right now, for instance, today they announced they're bringing forward a lot of the shipbuilding activities to help stimulate economy and keep people in growth, in jobs. And you're going to see more and more and more of this moving forward as the nation looks to spark investment, drive investment, bring forward programs. Now, at a point in time, Simon, and we're originally going to chat about this today, but I thought it more prudent for us to chat about COVID-19. I want to get back to some of those fundamental drivers in the economy, in the nation, about what really is stimulating housing demand. What is the true meaning of housing demand? And we speak about population growth and we bandy around a whole bunch of other terms on smartpropertyinvestment.com. But I want to do a deep dive into that, because people need to program their brains at the point in time as we emerge out of this current temporary crisis that we're in. They can start making more informed decisions. Now, mate, we're going to go to a quick break. We'll be back in a moment, and we're going to talk about, if you can afford to invest right now, where you should be investing. Stand by.
Propertyology regards right now as a very exciting time for investing in Australian real estate. There are some fantastic opportunities that Propertyology can help you take advantage of before buyers re-emerge from their coronavirus cocoons. Propertyology has a national focus. Now more than ever, experience and knowledge are the most valuable currency. Propertyology has that in spades. To find out how Propertyology's multi-award-winning buyers agents can help you prosper, contact them now at propertyology.com.au.
I'm Phil Tarrant here, host of the Smart Property Investment Show with Propertyology, Head of Research. Simon, I'm enjoying the frank conversation we're having, manoeuvring through some pretty significant macro and microeconomic principles and philosophies all the way through to sort of preparing your brain and having help navigate this attitude and mindset versus the mechanics. And we'll keep that conversation going through. Some people are doing it tough. We spoke about that. We've spoken about what the other side looks like. Let's chat about if you can invest right now.
Yep.
What should you be doing and where should you be investing? Because that's what I know everyone around wanting and hearing us to talk about.
Yeah, well, it is, mate, I say this every day before the coronavirus, and it's no different during the coronavirus. The best time to invest is always when you can afford to, always. The most important question is never when, including now. The most important question is where. The formula that Propertyology follow, you must start by reviewing 100% of your options. In Australia, we are an enormously diverse country. Across our 8 states and territories, we've got 185 individual towns and cities that have a population of 10,000 people or more. Key to having a chance of finding the best location must start by reviewing 100% of them. Do not be what I call an ignorant or arrogant investor, the creature of habit investor who thinks that their own hometown will always be the best place to invest, or the creature of habit investor that thinks that property markets are all about Sydney, Melbourne, or Brisbane. If that is you, you give yourself no chance of discovering the best locations. Over the last 3 years, the best performed locations in Australia were not ones that anyone would have expected to perform well as an ignorant or arrogant investor. They included, in no particular order here, Orange, Ballarat, Hobart, Launceston, Cooma, Burnie. They were the top 7 or 8 locations in Australia over the last 3 years. There would be very, very few Australians who would have even heard of those places, let alone think of investing there, because they did not consider 100% of your options. I do not expect that the next 3 years, the best performed property markets will be the high profile locations that people just keep focusing on. So what you need to look for in this order: locations that have a diverse economy, not your one industry communities. Locations that have not had a strong period of property price growth for many, many years. Locations that today have controlled housing supply. So low building approval volumes, low vacancy rates, and trending lower. That's the supply side of things. And then a big body of evidence of lots and lots of decisions where job projects have been approved but are yet to unfold. The leading indicator for demand is economies coming out of a period of stagnation and being underwhelming to progressively expanding. That is what happened for those locations I mentioned earlier: Orange, Ballarat, Burnie, Launceston, Hobart, Cooma. 3-4 years ago, those economies weren't doing anything spectacular. Today, they're among the strongest economies in Australia. So there's a lot of information there, I know, to digest, and it's not easy, but that's what people should be doing, or reach out to us and we'll help you do it.
So, Simon, I know you've got a lot of fans within the Smart Property Investment Podcast Network and the property community. You also got some detractors and naysayers, and they'll just be saying, oh, here's Simon again talking about regional properties and Cooma and Burnie and, Ballarat and Orange. This is what he always says. Yeah, what's the difference? What do you say to that? How do you respond to that?
Look, I don't do what I do to be popular, Phil. I do what I do to be objective, to help people make good decisions. We're no more pro-region than we are pro-capital city. What I'm trying to do is, what I am doing, will always do, is focus on what is investing. It's a decision to put an amount of money into a particular asset with no guarantee about what it will do in the future, but we all want it to do well. So I ignore the broad commentary that people make, and I've learned from history I've studied Australian property market real estate history and believe that we have a really good grasp of the things that influence property markets. So unapologetically, if there's locations in Australia that aren't a capital city that I feel they have a better set of ingredients than somewhere else, well, that's where we're going to invest because it gives ourselves the best chance of a market performing well. We will always do that. There will be times that we invest in capital cities and times we invest in regional locations. People need to be objective. It's like a share investor saying you should only ever invest in banking stocks or you should only ever invest in the top 10 companies on the ASX. Well, those top 10 companies on the ASX will never be the best performed stocks each and every year. And the same with property markets. So look, those who don't like what I say, again, I'm not in this to be popular. I'm in this to help people make informed decisions by removing emotion, removing bias, and using good quality information, whether that's capital cities or non-capital cities. That's where people should invest. The evidence is there, though, Phil. People can say it can be a detractor of regions, but at the end of the day, a region is just a term. A capital city is just a term. And the evidence is there. The 20 years of official data shows that every location in Australia has had good years, every location has had poor years, and every location has had lots of years where it hasn't done much. So every location is capable of performing well, no matter where it is on our map.
And this is, I guess, my role here at Smart Property Investment to make sure we cover off all these different views and opinions of experts right across the nation, and we'll continue to do that. And it's important, and you got to make your own. Our listeners make your own judgment call on it. You know, a lot of the stuff that you hear on the show is going to resonate with you. Some of it's not going to resonate with you. The fact that you're listening and being better informed, so you can make those decisions, is essentially the outcome that I want. Sharing these views and opinions. And Simon, I love having you on the show. It's always a good chat and a good discussion. We're going to have to wind this up, but before we do. We spoke about some locations. We spoke about where you should be investing, how you should be shaping those investment decisions. What's those handful of things that you should be doing right now as a property investor if you are thinking of buying? What's those top 3 things?
The first thing I'd like to say is not property market related. It's coronavirus related. We want the discomfort that we are all feeling now to go away as quick as possible. So to everybody who's listening to this podcast, I encourage each and every one of you to be a community leader, not a flog. Be a leader in the community and do the things that our national health authorities, who's getting information communicated to us by the Prime Minister, do that. And this discomfort will go away quicker. And when you see someone who's not doing that, politely pull them up. Get them to separate, get them to wash their hands, get them to do the things that we need to do. That's the first thing. Property investors. Review your strategy, review your finances. Now, for some people, that means purely surviving this period while their income is fragile and being resourceful and cutting household budgets, or taking advantages of those really good policies that we were talking about earlier to get through this lean period. For others, if you have confidence right now today in your income, you have arguably the most unique opportunity that you will ever have. Because there are very, very few people transacting in property at the moment. Real estate markets definitely are open. Real estate agents themselves, they can't feed their family without someone buying a property. Believe me, they want to get deals done. Our buyers agents are getting properties brought to our attention that we ordinarily would not receive because they would just sell without little effort at all. And people are going, hey, have a look at this. You know, an A-grade property picked up at a B grade price, because not necessarily because that vendor's in financial hardship, they might be, but more likely that they've already decided they're moving town because of job or family reason or whatever, and they're still doing that with or without the coronavirus. You know, they want to sell it. Buyers agents are in the box seat because we're the professionals buying properties, and the agents are coming to us saying, we've got this. So if you can afford to invest, $450 maximum purchase budget, 5% yield. Get your finance pre-approved using those financial parameters. Have the confidence that a yield of 5% and an interest rate of circa 3%, even if you've only got a 10% deposit in this next investment, the property will pay for itself. It's a unique opportunity. If you're in a position to get organised like that now, you are ready to invest now. The next question is, where in Australia should I be doing that? And it's the same process to answer that question you should have been following in January and February as you should be in March through to however long we're in our cocoons.
And Simon, I think that's going to be really a good thing for us to cover off. So let's lock in a time for next week to get stuck into that. And for our listeners, make sure you tune in, Unpacking the True Meaning of Housing Demand. So what we'll do there, Simon, I think, is just really pick your brain on your views of why population growth has very little influence on property price growth, what things have a bigger influence, and that's some of the stuff we've been chatting about today. If you give us some case studies around that, I'd really appreciate it. And, let's get stuck right into that, because I thank you for coming in and sharing that information. So watch this space. Maybe that's not the right thing. It's, tune in, listeners, as we get stuck into that. But Simon, I've really enjoyed the chat today. Thanks so much for spending some time with me to run through surviving and thriving COVID-19. I like your attitude and your practical approach to this, being prudent in ensuring that as a property investor, have the ability to hold the line through this and ensure that you don't need to be selling off properties. It's a great time to be a property investor if you can ensure your income. Got very low interest rates right now, and I know my portfolio is moving quickly into a new position, right? So that's great for me, right? So it takes a lot of heat off other finances, but in this light, and then also don't get caught up in the moment, as in this next period of time, and it might be 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, thinking about what the future, what the other side looks like. So we'll keep chatting through that, mate, but thanks so much for coming in.
My pleasure, mate. Always enjoy it. Everyone out there, please be safe, please be positive, take advantage of the things that governments have put in place, be a community leader. If you can invest, do so, and I'll look forward to chatting with Phil next time about helping you how to go about that.
Nice one, and thanks so much everyone tuning in. I hope you're doing well. I know I'm getting played a lot. I'm really quite conscious. It's quite serendipitous for me personally in that I know that hundreds of thousands of people tune into this thing every single month. So just knowing that I'm being recorded in people's homes right now while people are going about their day, I'm getting listened to in people's homes right now, people going through their day-to-day activities. So it's a real privilege for me to be part of this COVID-19 isolation and distancing for a lot of people. If you're out there having a walk, keep the exercise up. It's really great for you. And if I'm just in the background as you're going about doing something else right now, just a big quick shout out and say thanks so much for tuning in. We'll keep at it. We'll keep delivering. We'll keep ensuring that we're channeling through this information so you're a more informed property investor, and we get a real kick out of it as well. So make sure you get in touch with us, connect in. Everything's digital these days, and we've set up very digitally capable. If you're listening to this on Smart Property Investment right now, you can just click the record a question button, and that'll open up a little box and record your question in. So let's start having those conversations, those Q&As, and we'll bring in people like Simon, some other trusted professionals that we know as part of our community, come and answer them. So record them now. We'll answer absolutely anything that you're happy to record. So watch that space for those Q&As. Remember, just click that record button on the podcast where you're listening to this on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Right now, information is absolute critical commodity. If you're not yet subscribing to our daily morning newsletter, first to know what's happening in property right across the nation and COVID-19, smartpropertyinvestment.com.au/subscribe. Social media, Smart Property HQ, go and check it out. And we'll be back again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
The Trident formula, created by Sam Gordon at Australian Property Scout, is the strategic way to build a profitable property portfolio. If you're looking to perfect your strategy, go to www.australianpropertyscout.com.au to book a call with Sam himself.